This is Itziar Aikorta. I am Professor of Civil Law at the University of the Basque Country, and I would like to provide you with some tips on the new rules governing the processing of personal data in Europe. Why do personal data processing rules matter? With the new ruling, when the EU wants organizations to engage in a more consistent approach to data protection, becoming compliant with the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, starts with understanding the principles relating to processing of personal data. These personal data processing principles are always related to general principles such as fairness, transparency, freedom of choice, and so on. Where could these principles be found? Principles for processing personal data can be found in GDPR Article 5. There are really 6 principles for personal data processing and an additional one on accountability, which applies to all 6. Principles are lawfulness, purpose limitation, data minimization, storage limitation, accuracy, integrity, and confidentiality. Most of them are bundled together, as we shall see. The personal data processing general principles of lawfulness are settled in GDPR Article 5. It starts by saying that personal data must be processed lawfully, fairly, and in a transparent manner in relation to the data subject. This means that there must be a law allowing the processing. Consent of the data subject is the first and foremost rule to all processing. Nevertheless, in some cases, explicit consent is needed, as for instance, to authorize the processing of very sensitive data as genetic data. Lawfulness also means that data processing must be a fair game. Organizations should not hide things or pull tricks. They are bound to offer all information to the data subject in order that he or she make really free decisions. This entails explaining for which reasons the organization needs processing your personal data. Purpose limitation is the second principle of the GDPR. This limitation is the second principle, and it means literally that data collection and processing purposes need to be limited. They cannot be too general. Purpose limitation principles covers 3 fundamental elements. Personal data to be collected must serve a specified, explicit, and legitimate purpose, which should be communicated to the data subject. Once collected, personal data should always be processed in a way that is compatible with the purposes. And finally, when personal data is further processed for specific reasons, as for instance, research or archiving purposes in the public interest, this processing isn't considered to be incompatible with the initial purposes. Principle of data minimization. This principle of data minimization invites organizations to limit themselves to the minimum of personal data which they need in the scope of a processing. Adequacy and limitation simply mean using no more data than what is strictly needed for each processing purpose. You have a need for personal data that serve this purpose, but you can't go beyond the processing of data which are strictly needed and relevant. Minimization refers not only to the amount of data you need, but also to the quality of those data. In case that organizations can do with non-identifying data, as for instance in research projects, GDPR recommends pseudonymizing. The storage limitation principle is related with purpose limitation and data minimization. These principles mean that the data controller needs to specify for how long data are stored. It also means that data shouldn't be longer kept in a form that enables identification than is strictly needed for the personal data processing purpose. There are exceptions, as for instance, data storage for statistical purposes. The accuracy of personal data as a guiding principle means that GDPR recalls organizations that personal data which get processed must be accurate. This means that processed personal data must be always kept up to date. Measures must be taken to erase or rectify without any delay inaccurate personal data. There is a particular attention for accuracy in the context of profiling and decision-making based on these profiles. As for instance, when we are applying for a job, decisions should be based on quality data. That is why a data subject is entitled to ask for rectification and even erasure of her data, and also it's entitled to attack the decisions based on inaccurate profiling. You have here two last principles, integrity and confidentiality, that would be more literally explained in another video. So this has been data protection principles in a nutshell. Hope you enjoyed.